I think another thing that has changed over the 5 years is that willingness to collaborate. So there is more collaboration among the, other councils. And I think even within the communities, I think, they're quite happy to collaborate with us and, with our partners as well, private partners. So that's a really good, very good improvement that I have seen in the last 5 years.
And I think the funny thing about the collaboration piece, for a number of reasons, the shocks we've had with COVID. And one thing, I think the financial pressures are forcing us to think differently about the challenges that we're facing, not to mention obviously bigger challenges like climate change. And it's forcing people to come together to collaborate. And once they get used to that collaboration, because collaboration is hard, they're starting to see the benefits of, working together, whereas previously we've limited some of those outcomes by working individually.
Hi, Smart Community friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Smart Community Podcast. In this episode, I have a great conversation with Michael Healy and Grace De Leon from Smart Christchurch in New Zealand, which is part of Christchurch City Council. You might remember Michael as he's been on the podcast before in episode 244 in 2021. Michael and Grace tell us about their backgrounds and the biggest changes they've seen in the smart community space over the last 6 years, including the shift from technology first to community first approaches. We discuss the maturing of the smart community conversation towards more collaborative and outcomes focused work, and the natural progression from buzzwords and pilots to substance and getting a return on investment for smart initiatives. Michael and Grace tell us about a couple of projects that Smart Christchurch has been working on, including a fire detection network and a Smart View data sharing platform. We then talk about the Innovation Expo happening in Christchurch on the 10th and 11th of September in 2023. And I'm very excited to be emceeing the event and really cannot wait to be involved because they have some really interesting opportunities for engaging community and young people, not just the usual smart city types, but they'll be there as well. We finish our chat discussing the emerging trends and what we'd like to see next in this space, from esports to smart regions. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the smart community, smart regions, smart towns, and smart cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hello, Michael, and hello, Grace. I am very excited to have you on the podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us. We're very excited to be with you today.
Hey, Zoe. Hello. Sounds exciting.
Well, let's just jump straight in. Now, Michael, you've been on the podcast before, which was a year ago, which is wild. Sorry, 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Time flies.
Oh, my goodness. So wild to think about, but yeah, excited to have you both on the podcast, both from Smart Christchurch. But I'm going to hand over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're passionate about? Maybe Grace, if you want to start.
Hello, name is Grace. I have been in the program for about 6 years. My background is in hospitality and higher education. And so that is, I'm all about service, engagement, and satisfaction. So hopefully that I bring that to our community. I have recently completed my master's degree in applied computing. So kind of learned some of those technical stuff in computing. And I'm really passionate about solving problems and improving efficiencies and quality of life. That's me.
Awesome. Michael.
And funny, we found out that we both started our employment history at McDonald's, of all places. And one thing McDonald's does do is kind of teach you about structure, and it is a very hierarchical organization, but it's an interesting place to start your work history. But like Grace, kind of went through customer services, kind of got into corporate services, And then at a certain point, I discovered Lean Six Sigma, which was all about, I suppose putting a structured improvement methodology over processes. So I spent quite a few years doing that and kind of reached a point where I kind of had enough of it. And I was thinking, this is about 4 years ago at the end of a big project and a bit of a crossroads. And, with serendipity came an opportunity to join the Smart Christchurch team in May 2019, it'll be. And it kind of, I felt like, I suppose I'd found my people and I'd found the industry that kind of I felt aligned with my values and I suppose the way I like to work. So, and so it's been a really interesting 4 years and we've learned a lot. I think the two of us working together, but it's always a blast. It's always interesting, but it's pretty hard at the same time. So, but we're still here. So that's great.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the listeners would be able to relate to that, it's super interesting. They've found their people if they're working in the space, but that it's also very hard because if it wasn't hard, we would have done it all by now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we're going to go broad first, and then we're going to dive into some of the projects you've been doing and then also some exciting things that are coming up. So we'll go broad first. And what is a smart community to you?
You go first.
Yeah, I'll go first. For me, a smart community is always engaging with its citizens. Actually, yesterday I was, or not yesterday, day before yesterday, I was in the panel about designing for future communities. And one of the first thing that I said is citizen engagement, because what's the point of actually designing something because we thought like we want to have, we're going to be a smart community. We are going to change everything to electric vehicles. Let's put electric vehicle chargers everywhere. And then find out that you are actually putting it in a low socioeconomic background community that probably no one will be able to afford an electric vehicle from there. So what's the point in putting that there? So for me, citizen engagement is, part of being a smart community. And then obviously having those efficient infrastructure. A smart community will have, like the efficient public transport system. You have smart grids that basically improve the overall efficiency of a community. And then my other point will be something along a smart community should have, should attract businesses and investment through innovation and provide an environment that supports and fosters economic growth. You have to have that system in the community that would encourage innovation, have those startups coming up with this great ideas that would improve the efficiency and the overall quality of life in the community. That's probably some of the points for me.
I agree with everything she said, of course. But
before you go, Michael, I just want to touch on a couple of points you said there, Grace. Well, the first one around, talking to the community is obviously so important. But that example you shared of like where you can apply, electric charging infrastructure, it's an interesting one because again, it's like, sometimes we come in with the solution, right? And we go, oh, well, this is what we need. But actually, maybe that could be a solution down the track. But if we actually talk to the community, what is it that they need and want? And maybe they do want to try electric vehicles, but maybe instead of just the infrastructure, you also add an electric vehicle sharing scheme or more walking and cycling or whatever it happens to be. So I think it's a really, really good point that you made there. Over to you, Michael.
I suppose building what Grace has said, resilience has been, I suppose, a big part of our journey. And I probably said this in the last time we talked, but, over the last 13 years, the earthquakes kind of changed our city beyond recognition and presented some very challenging years. And then we had fires, we had floods, we had that terrorist attack in 2019. And then, like everyone else, then COVID came along. And it felt like one damn thing after another, to quote Winston Churchill. But I suppose what we've been trying to do is each of those events and all the little things in between that have challenged our community, we've tried to kind of learn from them and set ourselves up to be, I suppose, ready for the next big event. And I suppose one key recurring theme is that we didn't, to be quite frank, expect any of those things to happen. And each time we were really surprised. So I suppose a key thing about challenges with resilience is we don't know what the next big thing is. And it might be quite local to Christchurch, like the earthquakes were or it could be something that's, global, like climate change or COVID. So a lot of what we're trying to do is listen to community about what's important to them, but also set them up for what challenges lie ahead. And taking AI as a prime example of something that's stirring a lot of controversy, a lot of concern, a lot of excitement. I suppose, how do we share the facts with the community and work together to kind of have positive outcomes, as opposed to sitting back collectively and maybe being the victim of events or technology trends?
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. And I feel like we must have talked about that last time on the podcast as well. But it's so relevant and also not embedded enough, I think, as well. Like yet, we're still, trying to embed it in everything we do. But the smart community space has to have resilience in there. And, resilience from a disaster management perspective, of course, but then also resilience to just, individual, like personal shocks and stresses as well. And then using the tools that are available to us to be able to not just, I guess, react, but like, I think a lot of the work that you've been doing is around preparedness as well. So being prepared for those things. Some we can't necessarily prepare to the nth degree for, of course, but if we have, systems and processes and we're collecting the data, there are ones that we can prepare for, but then we can also lessen the impact for the response as well.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, now you've both been in this space for about 4 years now?
4 and 6, yeah.
4 and 6. So in those last, 4 to 6 years, what's been the biggest change that you've seen to date?
Well, I suppose probably, and it's fitting that this is the Smart Communities podcast, is the shift from, let's say, technology-first approach to community-first and opportunities, the problems, understand those, and then work with your community to frame up a response or a trial or, a different type of approach. And it's something that we've been, working hard. We released our strategy last year and it had adopted by council. But that was a chance for us to say, this is where we came from. But what we've reflected on both locally and what we've seen overseas is that real shift away from technology first. And it does feel like it used to be, we found this great widget, we think it's wicked, and then try to find a place to apply it and see if it fits. But I think the maturity, both in the program and ourselves and others, is that it's a lot more about having those open conversations and then working your way from there, as opposed to telling people what they should want, which is your point with the electric charges.
Yeah, I think it's also not about the technology, which is coming back to what actually the people need or the community need, rather than, okay, there's this big shiny thing that is brand new and let's all get onto it. But that's not how. And people and the community itself are actually smarter as well. They now ask a lot of questions. They just don't accept things when you actually present it to them. It's like, here, this is something that we want to implement. They would actually ask you a lot of questions instead of just saying, yeah. And so for us, that's why we're very careful with, when we want to do something. When we talk about our program, we actually don't say that we're all about tech. We actually say innovative solutions and approaches. So it's not just about, tech is just a tool that we use to actually implement those changes, but it's all about how do we actually do things differently to make it more efficient and to provide cost savings for both the community who we actually we're ratepayer funded. So if there is any efficiency that we gain and cost savings, that actually kind of comes back to the community as well.
Yeah, I suppose building on that, in terms of what our key stakeholders expect, both the community and internally, politicians, I think the ROI in terms of having more certainty about what we're delivering, the expectations raised. And so maybe, let's say things were a little bit looser back in the day, or maybe the expectations weren't so high. But with the track record that we've built and the conversations that we're having, expectations are growing. And that's a good development, I think. But it does mean that you've got to be a lot more stringent in terms of really kicking the tires of the projects that you're going to focus on, and actually be a little bit more, I suppose, data-driven, but also be a little bit more vicious.
Outcomes focused?
Yeah, with an
Or
expectation rising, you've got to be a lot more outcomes focused and be clear and make sure that you validate that, you report on that, and then you may decide to terminate trials or approaches if they haven't reached those expectations.
Yeah. And I think another thing that has changed over the 5 years is that willingness to collaborate. So there is more collaboration among the, other councils. And I think even within the communities, I think, they're quite happy to collaborate with us and, with our partners as well, private partners. So that's a really good, very good improvement that I have seen in the last 5 years.
And I think the funny thing about the collaboration piece and even thinking internally, some of the places that we've made progress with, I think the pressures on our operations, for example, in terms of budgets, a bit of that Western infrastructure crisis, in terms of not being able to maintain, keep on doing things the way we always have for a number of reasons, the shocks we've had with COVID. And one thing, I think the financial pressures are forcing us to think differently about the challenges that we're facing, not to mention obviously bigger challenges like climate change. And it's forcing people to come together to collaborate. And once they get used to that collaboration, because collaboration is hard, they're starting to see the benefits of, working together, whereas previously we've limited some of those outcomes by working individually.
yeah, I think that's a really kind of, what's the word? Interesting. I always say interesting. I'll try to think of a better word. A poignant point around that shift from, oh, wow, isn't this exciting? Let's try this, that, and the other, to the return on investment, which I think is a natural progression and like a sign of maturity. But also, yeah, the constrained fiscal environment as well that we find ourselves in after, a big pandemic where lots of money was spent to keep us safe, et cetera, et cetera. But also, yeah, I know like lots of governments are doing that as well. And also, it's I guess that natural progression of, okay, now tell me why, show me the return on investment on this. And I think we're becoming smarter in showing that return on investment as well. One, we have to dig down into the substance. We're not just talking about buzzwords anymore, which is, we always knew there was substance underneath. We just had to find that as well. Now, we're finding that we're shifting, and you have to try different things to kind of, find that substance. But also, we don't really have a choice anymore. Like you were talking about, people are being forced to collaborate on many different scales. People are forced to be doing things differently, maybe purely because the way that they used to do it isn't supported anymore in terms of like software at a very basic level, thinking about some of the things, but also it's not supported by society at large. And I say that in like the talent coming into organizations and things like that, there's no way that they're going to sit down and do a paper process when it doesn't make sense to do so, or those type of things, the working from home, which all comes from with different risks, but they're the next order signs of maturity of those different risks that then we need to take on and solve for, or mitigate for rather. So yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think, yeah, it'd be interesting what the next 5 years brings as well.
Absolutely.
5, 10, 15, 20, all of those years. Now, we want to talk about, what have you been up to? What's been happening in Christchurch?
Well, in terms of some of the projects, like always, some of our projects are rock stars and some of them maybe don't have that first big hit. So you ditch them. But some of the big projects we've got going at the moment, we've got the Fire Detection Network. I'll let Grace talk about that.
Yeah, so one of the projects that we have recently implemented is the Fire Detection Network. So after the 2017 Port Hills fire, we had started thinking about what can we do to make sure that or how could we utilize technology in having early warning? Because at the moment, really, unless you see smoke and, like the actual fire, no one calls, or no, fence will not know. So sometimes it's already a big fire before you can actually, get fence to Fire Emergency New Zealand to come and respond to the fires. So we do have this solution where we have a sensor that's got air quality monitoring that provides data about particulate matters, and then it's got thermal heat imaging, and then it combines both the data. And whenever there's a fire starting, it sends a notification to fence. And at the same time, this is a really interesting use case because that they have that fire detection, but then at the same time, because you already have that air quality monitoring that's taking place there's now data available to the community in terms of, pollen counts. So anyone who actually got allergy to pollen could minimize their exposure outside just by looking at the app and seeing the pollen contamination in the air. So this is a really interesting project as well, in the sense that we've started we've shared our business case to the other councils, and now Selwyn District Council have implemented the same solution, as well as Queenstown are about to install a few in a couple of months' time.
I suppose just to finish off that one, what I like about it as well is that it was an emerging threat in New Zealand with climate change and these forest fires, but obviously other parts of the world have had to deal with this long before now, not least Australia. So it was through some desktop research that Grace undertook that we actually found out about this technology being trialled in the Latrobe Valley. So it was a great example of Grace organising a bit of a tee-up between Spark New Zealand and Attentis, which was the company in Victoria, and actually creating a new relationship, between the two companies, and then having a local presence as well as having the support from Victoria. So it was, there's no point reinventing the wheel if somebody's already cracked it. Another project that we've been working on pretty much the whole time the program has been in existence is the Smart data sharing platform. So this was a platform or a web app that we've been developing internally since the start of the program. We started off with 10 data sets, and we've expanded to about 80 now. And we've come to a point where it's the second most popular web-based platform for our council. But we've come to a point where there's almost too many data sets. And while some of them have some good storytelling elements, we want to take it to the next stage and actually start piecing together the data sets to tell much richer stories and to give much richer value to the community. So we've been doing a co-design exercise with our community since the start of the year. And it's been really valuable for us. So in our strategy, we said we wanted to use co-design principles a lot more going forward. So it's been really great validating what people like, what they don't, if they know about it, why they don't know about it, what would make them use it. So it's been quite exciting. So we're looking to do a major kind of, I suppose, the third release basically of the platform later this year. But it's really validated I suppose that approach of working with your customers, your community to co-design and co-create. So it's been really cool. And
That's
it's
awesome.
one of these platforms we hope to replicate across New Zealand as well.
What kind of data sets are in there?
Well, we've got everything for like street art. You've got things like drinking fountains, the real-time positions of bus, but we've got crime stats, we've got the value of your property, and everything in between. So it's quite a really varied, and fruit trees on public land has been arguably our most popular data set. And again, with the cost of living crisis happening here and around the world, there's a real foraging community so we've been quite surprised by the interest in that. But I suppose just in as much as we're interested in what people have been using to date, it's what people need. And let's say if it's kids, it's an area we really want to focus on in terms of high school kids, university students. What do they need? What do parts of the community that aren't necessarily well represented now, what would be important to them? Is it where they can safely kind of places where people feel safe or don't feel safe? So we're just trying to get that insight into what would add value so that we can make it more useful to more people.
That's awesome. And I guess both of those, both the fire example and this one, is around like that data sharing and collaboration, which I think is such an overlooked, fundamental piece of this whole pie. Like, I was talking to someone yesterday actually at dinner, because this is what I talk about while eating dumplings, about, the digital twin, which I know, again, something else that New Zealand's been doing. But so we talk about the digital twin, we think, this, oh, wow, wouldn't it be cool? We'll have this 3D thing or whatever. We can use it for community engagement. We can use it for asset management. We can do all these things with it. We really need this. But actually, it's a really, and then on the flip side, people are like, oh, it's just a buzzword, what do we need this for, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, what we can use it for is as a catalyst to get all of our other data house in order, right? Or a house in order in terms of data and, all those other things and system integration and all those type of things. So I kind of see both sides where But if we use it as a catalyst, then you get the best of both worlds, because even if you don't necessarily reach that in the time that you wanted to, or, you know, you decide to go a different way, all of that work that you've done to bring that, you know, the data sets together, and, you know, it doesn't have to be digital twin, it could be something else to kind of like that vision, but actually the good substance and things, and you get such good outcomes, is when you actually, bring those things together, that real collaboration, both from a technical perspective and a human perspective. So yeah, both those examples, although they're very different, really show that kind of data sharing approach and all of the collaboration and things that you would have had to do to actually make that happen as well.
Yeah, completely agree.
Okay, well, do you want to talk about more projects, or should we talk about the exciting thing that we've been keeping secret from the listeners?
Drum roll, please. Let's talk about that. Grace.
Yeah. Well, yes. So Smart Christchurch is hosting the Innovation Expo on the 10th and 11th of September, which is on a Sunday and a Monday, the new convention center in Christchurch, Tupai. So for this, we're looking at having 100 exhibitors where we'll be showcasing the latest innovative solutions and approaches. We also have keynote on emerging topics. And some of the objectives of this event is for us to be able to showcase some of our innovators here locally, because some of them are actually very well known overseas and no one know what they are doing here in Christchurch. So it'll be good for them to be actually showcased. And then obviously we want to encourage collaboration between businesses, because some actually don't know what the others are doing. So if they are at the Innovation Expo, they kind of like, oh, you're doing this and I'm doing this, maybe we could work together. And in the past, the Innovation Expo have introduced, like, almost, I say introduced, but, you know, like there's that positive collaboration that took place during the Innovation Expo that then led to businesses creating something really wonderful. And then we also want to make sure that at the event, we encourage a lot of kids to attend, because we want them to be inspired. And hopefully when they see something, they would ask the question on how do you do that? And hopefully that would encourage them to be looking at, you know, okay, that's something that I want to do and I want to study that, because as we all know, or the enrollments for STEM courses are actually going like depleting, like going down. So hopefully that would, you know, them being able to attend the expo would actually change a little bit of how they think about those courses. Yeah, and I think the other important thing for us, and the reason why we do the Innovation Expo, is being able to demystify those myths that, especially for the community, think about, you know, for example, when we put pedestrian counting cameras, they probably think that, you know, oh, Big Brother watching us. But really, I mean, we have advanced the technology and no one actually could see who is in the video camera. We actually just get the number of people as a report. And hopefully for them being able to interact with the vendors would actually give them a little bit more understanding of how technology actually works, rather than what they could see on, you know, the adverts, or what they could see somewhere that is not quite true, or actually opens up a different interpretation of it. So engagement to the service provider or the product providers is actually a very good thing for the community to understand. And obviously, sometimes the kids come home from school and they'd say, oh, we have done this in school, and the parents kind of don't know about what is it. So hopefully both parents and the kids coming at the expo, they're going to have more understanding of how technology is really changing our lives and impacting our lives, not just changing it.
I was just reflecting that if the Innovation Expo was around when I was growing up, that I might have actually not wasted quite a lot of time working for McDonald's in low industries. But like, joking aside, thinking of kids, especially across our community, that wouldn't be exposed to these opportunities. If we can bring, you know, those kids to this place, get them excited and give them, I suppose, open up to opportunities to value add to the STEM industries and actually help accelerate their development and, make them excited about the future as well. So that's key. So I think it's a really great way to get young people excited about the road ahead.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting. And I think it's going to be a great, just a great event. And I'm really excited to meet a lot of new people. I guess the approach is different as well, like the Sunday and the Monday, to really get the community involved. And that's, a really big thing about moving from city to community, like smart city to smart community, is actually because we want people to understand. And, they don't need to be able to code or, they don't need to understand necessarily the buzzwords. And we play a lot of buzzword bingo around these parts when you've been in the, space for a while. But yeah, how can they actually understand enough to get the information they need to ask questions or feel empowered to ask more questions, because then you have more empowered citizens, more active citizens, so then you can actually continue to move forward. Because without that, you can't build trust, you can't build these other things and things that might be, really good for the community. But if we can't explain them in their language and they can't engage and be involved in that, then they won't happen, right?
And we've got this fantastic MC and guest speaker coming over. You might have heard of them, Zoe, either. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't going to mention it, but, I guess I should, because I'm really excited to be there. And thank you for having me. I mean, shaping up the program is also really exciting. We'll have Jonathan Reichenthal as well, which is really awesome too. And he's very good at speaking with both the community and the professionals. And he's been on the podcast multiple times. So we can link that in the show notes if people want to click away and find him. That might be a secret. Is that still a secret? Probably a secret.
Not anymore. Well, unless you
not
edit
a
it
secret anymore. But yeah, so no, it should be really great. And I'm looking forward to spending a few days in Christchurch as well, because I only spent one night there earlier this year and I'm keen to see more of it. Yeah. So fun and exciting. I think it's going to be really great to get the smart community together as well. I think there's going to be a lot of, some of the same faces, but new faces in there too. So that will be really cool too.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, for instance, we were at the Digital Twin Summit run by the Smart Cities Council just a couple of days ago. And it was that mix of people, when you see the same faces, but actually half of the room had never been to it. So I think that's one of the trends. This area is mainstreaming. More people are interested. And I've talked about digital twin with our mayor, our deputy mayor, and every single member of our senior leadership team separately over the last month. Now, even a year or 2 years ago, and digital twin's just one example of, I suppose, the work we do. But it's great to, see some of these things hit the mainstream and having a conversation with your colleagues, your peers, elected members, and the wider community. It's quite an exciting time.
Yeah, and I think when they do mainstream, the what's the word? The nonsense or the super hype or whatever has to fall away, because people, drill down into the substance. And I think that's really good, because then we move forward with, the real outcomes that it can achieve. You can start with, your baseline, your foundation, and then build on top of that. Yeah, I think that's really awesome. And you'll give me a link and I'll put it in the show notes so people can click away. And, if they're in Christchurch or want to go to Christchurch, they can come along. It's really exciting.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Well, that leads us really nicely to the future. So let's talk about what are the emerging trends that people aren't talking about enough.
I suppose we've been thinking about, and we've seen kind of councils around the globe dabble to some extent in this, is to think about, I suppose, the replication of, let's say, there's 2 or 3 things like Smart View, and we've developed a graffiti recognition app that we think other cities would benefit from. So I've been trying to think about the best strategy to actually replicate that. Let's say for that graffiti example, replicate it to every major urban centre in New Zealand, because we know it's an issue, obviously. But there's quite a few logistical challenges to that in terms of hosting, data sharing, security. And we think there's an opportunity. So if we've got 2 or 3 things we think could benefit a number of other councils what have other councils got in terms of IP and really cool stuff they've developed that we could share. So I think it's hopefully a positive conversation over the next few years in terms of even within your country or your region, like Australasia or further afield, how can we share, the cool stuff, the good oil, and be open about it as well. I mean, there may be commercial opportunities associated with that, but I suppose councils aren't here to be commercial entities, and it would be it'd be great if we could start having a smart communities marketplace that is actually more about sharing and almost, sharing like for like, or, give and take, as opposed to just dollars and cents and trying to make a buck out of it. So quite interested to see how that space goes.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think like a council kind of pitch fest, but it's like who benefits? The community benefits, because you're able to share across. Like I know there's a few marketplaces like Be Smart City and things like that overseas. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how, and I've had them on the podcast a while ago now. I have to reach out again, just reminded me. But yeah, how that could work, because, we get together for conferences, but a lot of the time it's kind of more sharing maybe higher level stuff or strategies, or, we do share projects and things, but actually getting into the nitty gritty of it after we might go, oh, we really want to talk to XYZ about that. But then, sorry, I'm just thinking of the name XYZ now, probably Elon Musk's other child or something like that. Anyway, we want to talk to somebody else. But once you get out of that conference mode, you might end up having to go back to BAU, business as usual. Yeah. So you might, so I think like creating those opportunities is one, but then getting leadership support to then follow through and, actually do that genuine collaboration is really key.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Because at a number of occasions I've come away from events like that and go, hey, Smart View, we want to get a Smart View, X, Y, Z city. And the enthusiasm is there in the world, but for whatever reason, it hasn't come to fruition. So you're right. I think we just get hit with BAU when we come back. So maybe there's a way to just keep those kind of really positive, creative conversations going in the interim between events or between, people coming together.
Yeah, so for me, what I think that people aren't talking about, particularly here in our community here in Christchurch, is an emerging trend. Actually, it's not emerging because, for me, smart community is encompassing. And one of the trends that I'm seeing is about e-gaming or esports. Gaming industry is actually a really very fast growing industry. And I think people are still in that, I think they're still in the middle of whether they decide it as something that is actually for entertainment or actually for business use. But, if you come to think of it, when was the last training session that you did that didn't have gamification? And so for me, that's kind of still, it's emerging, but it's really coming mainstream now. And I think for us here in Christchurch, we've been supporting it. There are some organizations that's been running e-gaming, but I think there is not a mainstream support from, the government itself. I mean, the government is supporting the game development because there's now that rebate that's being given to game developers. But in terms of the actual users of it, there's not much support that's happening in that space at the moment. And I think, if we're going to be an inclusive community, we want to provide those grassroots events that would let our Rangatahi to participate in international competitions, such as I know that I think in last month in July, Saudi has hosted an esports competition where they have a prize pool money of $45 million US. So that for me is something that I think we have to start looking at.
And I suppose the other thing, and it really highlighted through the earthquakes with our wastewater system as an example, in terms of having that traditional approach of dealing with waste and a centralized network that pushes, human waste kilometers down towards the sea. When the earthquake kind of disabled that network, it really highlighted the limitations of that approach of how we've been dealing with human waste, for example, in Christchurch for 150 years. And I suppose looking at the energy industry in terms of the transition going through now, in terms of the two-way capability of the hybrid generation approach in terms of centralized generation, but also local generation, and how has the network been upgraded to cope with that hybrid power generation. I'm just interested to see what we can do with waste, but also water collection in terms of these, the violent and the extreme weather events we're having. We've got too much water, we haven't got enough, and we're struggling to, get rid of it in the way we've always tried to do. So I suppose, what are the opportunities from a hybrid neighborhood point of view? How could you treat wastewater, or how could you store things to use it when you need it? So there's a lot of conversations happening about that, but I think we need to take more risks in terms of how we, some of the traditional infrastructure, cities infrastructure, we need to kind of get some runs on the board and learn about other ways of doing it and be more open-minded, I think, as well, because we can't afford to keep on doing things with the way we always have in this space.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot in that, both from waste, but also the esports. One of my good friends says, even if the trend, like if you're not into it, doesn't mean it's not a trend. Like I'm not necessarily going to play esports, but who knows? But that, it's happening and it's there. And yeah, it will be exciting to see. I know there's lots happening at the Innovation Expo around esports as well, which is fun.
It's really interesting because there are some published articles, journals overseas, like in Japan, where they did studies about the impact of it to the elderly being able to play esports, and there was interesting outcomes about, the impact that it could have for people with Alzheimer's or dementia. And so, like in Japan, they actually have facilities that just cater for seniors that could play esports. So, would that be something in the future that's going to be a trend where, you have the rest homes actually having esports facilities in their actual facilities,
You could have like retirement village, like versing each other, like a competition, worldwide competition of, different facilities. It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, where to next for smart cities and communities?
Well, I suppose that's the $1 million question. I suppose that we talked about things being tough, and that's part of the reason we enjoy what we're doing. But the other thing about smart communities is that you don't know, you know some of the trends upcoming, but you don't know what's going to stick, what's not going to not. I mean, self-driving cars is an obvious solution. The rollout of small cell 5G is another obvious example of something that was hyped up in terms of timescale, and is actually the reality of it has been a lot more complicated than that was initially kind of pitched in this, at the start. So in terms of what next, I mean, from our point of view, I mean, we're in a good place as it stands. We've got permanent funding for the program, but I think we really need to embed that innovative mindset and the capabilities within our organisation, and again within the community. So even, let's say, having a relatively strong function on its own is great, and that's, but to have really widespread change, we need to get that spirit of innovation right across the board. So it'll be an area of focus for us to kind of, I suppose, almost decentralize the function in a way from an organizational point of view. But I think we've learned over the years that to empower others to be innovative is a lot more powerful than, holding the innovation stick yourself. And to have real change, it has to happen en masse with the mainstream, with friends, colleagues, but also the people we serve.
Yeah, I think and the other focus that we have is to really get into that New Zealand-wide collaboration, because for us, we're I'm not going to say very small, but we are a tiny country. And if all of our councils could work together, we can probably leverage the economy of scale, in terms of, if we're going to do an implementation sensor-wide, instead of just a city-wide, we could do a nationwide implementation that's going to bring more impact. And with that, the biggest, because at the moment we have smaller councils that can't afford what we're doing. So if we could actually leverage it for the whole of the country, then hopefully all of the other smaller cities could benefit as well.
And it's a trend I've noticed in Australia when I was in Melbourne early in the year and talking to councils like Gordondara, for example. They're working with other neighbouring councils on, creating panels for IoT devices as an example. but it just means you can be a lot smarter, you can do things quicker, you can be more responsive to your community. So that seems to be a positive trend. So I'm hoping in the next 5 years, maybe that's the next big leap what we can do in terms of whether countries, regions, or, big urban conurbations like Sydney and Melbourne and Auckland, for example, how can they, work collaboratively, better?
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I call smart regions approach, and particularly in Australia where you've got those distances that are so vast, but, you've got your councils right next to each other. Well, not right yet. They're quite a long distance. So even just covering your own, could be an expensive exercise. But then if you partner with your other councils, you can leverage that economy of scale that you're talking about. But also I'm seeing a lot of thinking both technology, but also data and how we can share data more effectively, even across state government agencies. For example, I think we don't necessarily realize how much we're duplicating and all those type of things because we're not looking holistically enough, because we've all kind of progressed as we had to as we move forward. But now if we can take stock of what's happened, and like obviously Australia and New Zealand, we're also we're right there, so we could also do a lot of collaboration too across the ditch, which I think would be also super beneficial to both of our communities.
Yeah, well said.
Well, it's been so great to have you both on the podcast. Thank you so, so much. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you both in person in September. But one last question, how can people connect with you?
Well, we've got the Smart Christchurch website. Both Grace and I, you'll find us on LinkedIn. We spend a lot of time there, probably too much time. I need to delete the app, limit my time on it. So reach out via that. We've also got Smart Christchurch at ccc.govt.nz. And for the Innovation Expo, you can go to innovationexpo.nz. So there's many ways there to contact us, but we love talking to people from around the world, from other parts of New Zealand, and just sharing, because I think it gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling when you share information, you see good things happen from that, and vice versa. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the podcast. We will put all the links in the show notes, and I'll catch you on LinkedIn in the meantime. But yeah, looking forward to catching up in real life, in 3D, in September.
Wonderful.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zoe.
Too easy. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Smart Community podcast is brought to you by My Smart Community. If you're trying to deal with disruption, not sure what technologies to buy, need to facilitate genuine collaboration, then we can help. Email hello@mysmart.community or head to www.mysmart.community/consulting.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes are available on our website, mysmart.community/podcast. If you have any questions for us or any of our guests, you can email hello@mysmart.community. You can also find us on the socials. We are on LinkedIn and Twitter @SmartComHQ. That's com with 2 M's. If you are enjoying the podcast, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we would love for you to leave us a rating and review at wherever you listen. This really helps us reach more ears and eyes, so thank you for your support. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.